for their diligence and very detailed-oriented organization. And I want to thank Eric and Kim for inviting me. And I want to thank the students that I got to share time with over the last 2 days. If the future is in your hands, I think we will do more than survive. And so I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your diligence. So in light of the student protests today, I changed my presentation a bit. So I am going to talk about my work, but I'm going to start with giving some language to why protests like these happen and talking through some of the inequities in higher ed. And then I'll get to my talk, which is about reimagining academia's relevance. Because I don't think Gen Z or Gen Alpha is that interested in how we've been doing things. And there's good reason for that. So I'm going to start with, if we want to heal, we must tell the truth, a quote by Pauli Murray, who they were way ahead of their time using they, them, and being a non-binary person a long, long time ago. As some kids, oh, Mom, you were born in 1980. Did you get to meet dinosaurs? Like, whoa, chill. But it's true. If we want to heal, we have to tell the truth, and it has to be an indisputable truth, right? So right now, at a moment where Florida is literally attempting to rewrite history, right, and erase everything Black out of that history, everything intersectional, everything political. What is that doing, and who is that protecting, right? And so what are some of the truths that we have to tell, even just about higher ed? So let's talk about diversity. So I call diversity the dirty word. It's slanging the D, okay? And so let me tell you why. So in 1965, affirmative action was initially created to ensure that there wasn't discrimination happening in the workplace around hiring. But what we weren't talking about in 1965 was organizational culture. So if we're going to invite all these people to come to this table that's pre-built, but we're not going to shift the culture, we're just asking them to assimilate. That's a recipe for disaster. And so in 1987, folks were like, hey, y'all are doing this diversity thing wrong. Let me help you. Pay me big bucks. So 1987 is the first time diversity is commodified and sold at a profit. Today, it's an $8 billion a year industry. Where does that money go to, right? Is your life as a person dramatically changed despite an $8 billion a year investment? No, it's not. Why? Because it goes to hiring token individuals who are expected to do all the dirty diversity work, and then once they're burnt out, wash, rinse, repeat, right? We just bring in someone else. And I believe y'all are in the middle of that cycle right now. Yeah, I'm gonna call you out on your shit. Just be ready. 1995, Clinton's like, hey, we gotta fix this thing. So he starts talking about quotas and numbers, and this is where diversity becomes about data, right? We have to have this many women and this many people of color. And so again, no changing organizational culture. And so this is where we get this deep divide between merit, quality, great candidate pool, and a diverse candidate pool. Right? This idea that if we're hiring diverse individuals, we must have looked over the more qualified white people, okay? This idea that if you're here and you're a person of color or a woman, you were accepted because of your race, because of your gender, not because of your excellence, right? Because of your intellect. And so we fast forward now to 2020, diversity's become a dirty word. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to be in that position. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. And so we start shifting away from diversity and equality. We start talking about equity, right? This is also the year George Floyd is murdered. All these corporate institutions and all these higher ed institutions, these nonprofit institutions, this is annoying. I'm just gonna put that down. I'm not even looking at it, and I'm annoyed because I know it's moving behind me. All these institutions start writing these statements. Y'all saw them, you read them, right? Every institution published a statement. And what do these statements do? They absolve the institutions from doing any actions. Why? Because they said we did enough. We acknowledged that this is really jacked up. But we didn't apologize for what's happening. We didn't acknowledge the harm we've caused or the role we've played in injustice, because it's not just a systemic thing. We didn't create action items or attach personnel and due dates to those items, so nobody can hold us accountable. So we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary. What's changed since 2020? What's gotten better? What's gotten worse? Very little's gotten better. A whole lot has gotten worse. So in 2023, did anything change? Not really. So let's look at what Black and brown faculty are experiencing in the workplace. So 12% of the population identifies Black, but only 7% of faculty do. 18% of the population identify as non-white Hispanic, 9.8% of faculty do. Efforts to diversify have increased every racial demographic except Black people. Calm down, microphone. Black and brown people are expected to lead, often without compensation, on top of their already disproportionate duties mentoring students of color, often without their recommendations being adopted, right? So students of color, queer students, trans students, they find safety with me. They are always in my office crying, always. But they're not in my other colleagues' offices crying, right? So that's some invisible labor that isn't counted in the tenure dossier, right? That's not service. I don't know what that is, but it's something. It definitely is service, but it's not counted as service. Then on top of that, I'm expected to change the institution. Like with what time? Okay, with what time? Please, I'd love to. And then Black women who are in these positions experience extreme racism, sexism. It results in burnout, but we also are dying, right? Heart disease is the #1 killer of Black women professors, right? So this work that I do is not just about making the conditions better for my student. It's about keeping my ass alive, okay? And not stressing myself out. And then Black and brown folks in higher ed who study race are tapped to be the face of diversity initiatives. Diversity and race are two different things. Studying the experiences of one group does not mean you are qualified to create diversity initiatives, right? And diversity is not just about race. And it's also not about thought. If anybody uses that language, we need a diversity of thought. No, we don't. Do you know why? Because thoughts change. What you need is a diversity of experience. That doesn't change, right? What you've experienced is what you've experienced, and we want people from multiple experiences. But diversity of thought, we have to ask ourselves, where do our thoughts even come from? So if we want this person who has thoughts that are causing a lot of harm, and these thoughts were just gifted to them by the societies in which they live, that's not diversity, right? That's perpetuating a particular ideology that causes harm. There's more. Institutions hire us to reach their goals and then completely ignore us. We're isolated, racial climate doesn't get better. Individual campus diversity initiatives don't mitigate structural issues. So we're like, but we have these initiatives, but that doesn't fix systems, right? Systems don't change people. Institutional policies don't change systems. People don't change laws and systems either. It takes all of us, right? Everybody has to contribute. So asking me to do something without fixing those systems means that whatever I'm doing is going to be temporary. Black and brown professors also face challenges in the classroom, right? So oftentimes their evaluations are a lot lower, right? Because of this perceived incompetence. Again, you probably got this job because you're a person of color. Universities often use the excuse, well, there weren't just enough people in the candidate pool, right? However, Black and brown faculty are overrepresented in non-tenure track positions. So that means that they're out there. You're just choosing to ignore them when it comes to tenure track and positions that are more senior. And lastly, Black and brown people in higher ed are the champions and perceived threats. So they ask us behind closed doors to come and fix their problem, come talk to me about this thing. But then when we're in public facing, we're causing division. We're the problem, right? So again, it's disbelief, it's blockage, things don't get picked up, nothing gets done, evil persists. Students are feeling similarly. I don't have student data that's national. This is at my institution, but I can probably get a head count and figure out y'all probably have some of the same issues here, considering there's a protest today, right? So when we collect data, another huge threat to progress when we're trying to fix these systems is we haven't disaggregated data in a way that lets us see the nuances of how racism works, of how sexism works, of how ableism works. Instead, we've categorized our students as white and non-white, okay? as if every non-white student has the same experience. So I had to go and disaggregate the data myself, because on the face of it, 43% of students of color who feel moderately or completely included on campus, that's great. That's almost half. But when you break it down, 25% of black students feel included, right? 36% of our Middle Eastern students feel included. Half of our Asian and Asian American students feel included. These numbers tell a different story, right? So what we're looking at here, and what you will see across these slides, is we're not just talking about racism, we're also talking about deeply institutionalized anti-blackness. 55% of students of color feel like they kind of matter, but 40% of black students feel that way. 78% of both white students and students of color said they learn about race from other students. That's a problem. What are our teachers teaching then? And then 77% of white students and 8% of students of color say they didn't learn about race anywhere on campus. But again, black students, that number is significantly higher. Why are we talking to our black students about race but not all the other students? Again, anti-blackness and racism, they work hand in hand, but they're not the same. So then we look at the prevalence of microaggressions, like who's being microaggressed. And I want to be real clear. Microaggressions aren't called microaggressions because they are micro, so barely aggressive. They're called microaggressions because they're between people. So 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, small group, that's micro. Meso-institutional macro systems. Microaggressions hurt deep, okay? They're not small and insignificant. And so when we look at who's experiencing microaggressions on campus, our black and brown students are significantly higher than everyone else, followed by our Asian students. So again, if we disaggregate the data, are we seeing a different story? Are we seeing something else that's happening? So how do we fix all of these things? Well, one is to start with language and reimagining how we do DEI work on campus. And I'm guessing this is going to be real important since you no longer have a vice president of diversity. So inclusion has to be radical. That means that people have to be included from idea to implementation to assessment. Because if I throw a dinner party and I assess my own dinner party, I'm going to give myself an A, right? Period. But what if, most of us, when we decide we're going to have a dinner party, what do? We start planning the menu. We start inviting our friends. But who thinks to ask, hey friend, do you even want to have a dinner party? Right? That's where we start. Will this initiative be helpful for you? If so, can we work together to make sure that it's in alignment with the community's needs? And then can we work through the entire process so I don't spring some random ingredient on you that might kill you? Okay? Diversity can no longer be a dirty word. It's got to be nuanced, and it has to be spread across every sector. When you do have a diversity of experience, it shows that every organization thrives more. They meet their margins better and faster. They have a more efficient workplace. Their workplace culture improves. Diversity of experience makes a huge difference. And that's not just in subordinate roles. Org charts, leadership has to change too. Equity. Right now we define equity as a state where a person's identity can no longer predict their life outcomes. But the problem with that is the outcome is the end. What about the process, right? Equity has to be about process. It has to be about ensuring that everybody has access to participate in change making, feels included, feels valued, and that the people who are most impacted by injustice are the ones coming up with the solutions, not the people who are distanced from it. And then accessibility has to be universal. COVID taught us that we can have universal accessibility, that we can make learning accessible. We've just chosen not to, right? And as soon as COVID started getting better, by the way, it's still out there, what do we say? Come back to work. I can't wait to come back to work. You know who did not want to go back to work? People who look like me. Because I realized how much of my labor was being tied up in dealing with microaggressions, in trying to find a gender-neutral bathroom, in trying to make sure my students felt okay, right? All that invisible labor. And so all of these elements have to live and breathe in every single facet of the university, not just in a single office guided by a single team, not just at the Brown Symposium, not just in the Radical Imagination workshops, not just in Eric's office, right? It has to be everywhere. Okay, so now I'm getting to my actual talk. This is where I was gonna start, okay? So Robin D.G. Kelley is one of my favorite scholars, and his work is all around Black imagination. So how is it that Black folks continually reinvent themselves and create different forms of resistance and resilience in a place that is very much still littered with white supremacy? And so he says, without new visions, we don't know what to build, only what to knock down. We not only end up confused, rudderless, and cynical, but we forget that making a revolution is not a series of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform. So what is speculative inquiry, right? So some people call it like Afrofuturism, and now we have indigenous futurisms and Asian futurisms, all these different futurisms, transfuturism, something I coined, but it's all about speculation. So speculation is a form of theory or a conjecture without firm evidence, right? We can speculate an increase in profit. We can speculate an increase in diversity. We can speculate certain things. And inquiry, I can put this down again, I think it don't have as much clicks, or not. Inquiry is the systematic exploration of a phenomenon to increase understanding, right? So our research. So what then is speculative inquiry? So speculative inquiry is leaning into the unknown as a radical act to curiously explore future potentials in an effort to increase capacity for alternative futures. Speculative fiction is about using stories to tell of alternative futures, and speculative inquiry is using research to do the same. So does our research generate new futures? That's the question for speculative inquiry. Can we generate new futures with our research? So some guiding questions. I'm an autoethnographer. Who in here knows what autoethnography is? All right, hey friends. So autoethnography is all about using your personal experience to connect it to the political, to make some sort of gesture towards the nuance of a thing, right? So it gives us a deeper, thicker understanding of a phenomenon in a personal narrative and connects it to a political existence in an effort to change it, soften it, make it stronger, whatever. And so one of the things that we do as autoethnographers, we rely on past experience, right, to connect to the political future. What happens if we give seasoned autoethnographers the gift of future storytelling? Can I write myself into the future, like Alicia talked about last night, right? Like Black people are in the future. Can I write myself into the future and then analyze that as scientific data? Why not? Can we give researchers space to develop methods that live and dwell in futurity? Because right now, the bulk of our research is about creating awareness or understanding what is happening now or what has happened in the past. But how many of us are doing research about what could be possible in the future? Oh no, wait, stop. Can theory predict and sustain a future way of life where liberation is a plausible outcome, right? And so instead of using the past to understand how humans function, can we use the future to help humans function differently? And last, what happens when our academic work fosters community healing and possibility models, right, versus just awareness? So there was a point in my life where if I asked an activist, what's wrong with the world? They could talk for like 5 years straight, okay? Just complaining, right? Because there's a lot of stuff wrong. But then you say, well, what do you want? It's crickets, right? Because we've been taught to dismantle all these systems, but not what to rebuild in the wake, right? So that is changing now. So you can see that at protests, and I'm sure we'll probably see that today. Instead of signs that say what we don't want, you're gonna see signs that say what we do want, right? Or students creating a list of demands, right? So we know what we want now, and we are starting to be more vocal about that. So is there a way to use our academic work, you know, the rigor and the validity and the generalizability to build a new future, to build something else? So futurity, I define futurity as the intentional imagining and materializing of liberated futures where freedom from oppression, trauma, violence, and discrimination are realized. Okay? So a future world where my body is thriving and is not experiencing harm directly caused by oppression, directly caused by unjust systems. So how do we use our research and our works to conjure this world where we can thrive as individuals and as communities? So some questions that I want you to just ponder, right? When and how do you know you're in the future, right? So like Alicia said last night, Black people are in the future, but when is that? Is it right now? Is it now? Right? Is it now? So when and how do you know you're in the future? What's the function of history, memory, and the past in crafting future, right? Because there's this idea called Sankofa that comes out of Ghana. There's an Adinkra symbol, and it looks like a bird with its head backwards. And what it says is you go back and fetch it. You have to understand your past if you want to create a different future, right? So the past, history, memory, they're critically important. So again, at a time when our country is actively trying to hide the truth, to bury it in banned books, to say you can't say the word intersectionality on your faculty webpage. Like what? You know, when AFAM history cannot be included as an AP class, we are actively trying to change history. And don't get me started on AI, because I'm like, if we can make a picture with a person in it and a video with a person in it that does not exist, that's a tool to rewrite history. Because apparently we believe videos. Have you ever seen a 12-year-old on TikTok? They believe everything. Everything. What's the function of speculation in crafting new futurities, right? So last night, Kim and Eric talked about imagination and why they picked imagination. It has a really important function. How do we build something that doesn't exist? We've got to imagine, we've got to speculate about its utility. And then what's the function of action? Because we got to do it, right? It's not enough to just imagine. We have to do something with that imagination. And then finally, when and how do we know to take action? Especially in the realm of cancel culture. Cancel culture has people terrified to even say anything, let alone do something. And I'm here to tell you, don't worry about cancel culture. It's all fake. You get canceled on Monday, by Tuesday, you're in the Bahamas with a whole new group of friends. Like, don't even worry about it. Cancel culture is a passive performance of allyship. It's a way to say, look, I'm woke, I understand, we don't mess with that person, but in reality, we're not holding that person or the systems within which they work and live and learn accountable. So, FUFA. All right, so how do we create some new paradigms then to change an academic landscape? And what do these paradigms do specifically for Gen Z and Gen Alpha? So if you have any Gen Zers or Gen Alpha-ers in your life, you know that they are very clear about doing things differently. They are not interested in brand loyalty. They're not interested in a long-term career. They are interested in joy, happiness, and living. They don't model their future plans off of their career. And so higher ed has created this story that you come to college so that you can get this career. And that's not going to work for a generation that is not settling to change their life based on their career, right? They want to have a fulfilling life that's full of purpose. And so what can higher ed do then to shift that narrative and create a sense of purpose for young people who are like, enough with the bullshit. Fix it all. Like, they're mad at us. I mean, I say us loosely because I'm not a boomer. Or anyone above that, which I think they call like the silent generation, which is really scary. Like, you just don't exist anymore because you've aged over a certain number, right? Where this country is ageist AF. But anyway, I didn't participate in these things, right? And this is a common refrain. I didn't do that. Nobody alive today was born a slave or a slave master. This is not our issue, but it is. Right? So what are we going to do to help young folks see that there's value in coming to college and learning how to think critically, learning media literacy, but also learning how to use the content they're creating to become the influencers they wish they could be that actually engages change making. So, when you think of these kids who have these huge platforms who get paid millions of dollars a month because they're cute and their parents know how to edit video, what changes when they have the gifts that we have in terms of critical thinking, media literacy, social justice, activism, all those things, right? And this is a safer place to learn that. So we're gonna go through some new paradigms. So for all my students in the room who are researchers, you probably will learn this in a social science or humanities research class, right? So we talk about epistemology, ontology, and axiology. These are the three words. You've heard those words? Yeah? Yes? No? Raise your hand if you've heard those words. Good. They get thrown around a lot. And you're probably like, what does that even mean? It's a bunch of ologies. Yes, it is. So epistemology, okay, I'm gonna put this down because it's annoying me again. Epistemology is the nature and origin of knowledge, right? Where does knowledge come from? How do we know what we know? Ontology is about reality, right? So where does reality come from? Who creates reality? Is there more than one reality, or is there just a single reality? And axiology is all about values. Do values impact how we do research, or should research be objective and value-free? Okay? It does not, what I value shouldn't impact my research, or maybe it should impact my research. The things that we don't talk about as much are goals and methods. So goals, what's the overarching reason for doing this research, right? What are the outcomes and the deliverables? And then last, methods. How do you collect and analyze your data to achieve these goals? And so the traditions that we normally teach students are post-positivist, humanist, or interpretive, and the critical traditions. So for post-positivists, we say knowledge is out there with a little t. It used to be a capital T, but folks got hip and they're like, we can't claim capital T truth anymore. They're gonna come for us. So it's like, oh, it's a little t. Same thing, but whatever. So it's out there. Humans don't impact knowledge. It's our job to discover it. Reality, there's only one reality, and it's our job to discover it. Research should be value-free, and our goals are to create generalizable data, right? It's predictive, and it's explanatory. We want to explain human behavior because we've looked at enough people to know if you do A, B will happen. And so what do we use? We do experiments and survey research, highly quantitative data collection and analysis. For humanists, we say, well, it's subjective and interpretive, that knowledge, we create knowledge based on our research or based on the things that we know and do. That there are multiple realities, right? My reality doesn't trump someone else's. That research is always value-laden. So the fact that you chose to ask a question about a certain population exposes your values. And that our goal is to get deep understanding. I want to understand A, B, and C. And so we do that with ethnography, autoethnography, focus groups, interviews, surveys, rhetorical analysis, performance studies, embodied work, etc. Qualitative data collection and analysis. And for the critical, it's all about power, okay? So the critical folks are like, power creates knowledge. We understand knowledge because of power, and people with the most power are the ones who, decide what is knowledge and disseminate it. Reality is created and chaperoned by power as well. So those with power, their reality tends to be the dominant reality, and our other realities are sort of subculture. Our values are shaped by power. They influence how we do research. And so a critical scholar is trying to emancipate by way of illumination. I'm going to bring critical awareness to this thing. And so same methodologies, right? Same methods of collecting and analyzing data. And so I started thinking about what does it mean to create new paradigms that have built-in accountability and responsibility. Because when we look at these paradigms, we are essentially telling researchers, your job is to illuminate this thing, and then you get to publish it and walk away. There is nothing in here about what we do with our data. What role does data play in social change? So I wrote two new paradigms, action and futurity. And so the action paradigm says, hey, knowledge is subjective. It's co-created in community, so communities build knowledge. It's rooted in power, and it's systemic. For reality, the community reality should take precedence over the researcher's reality. So what you assume to be true as a researcher should not be more important than what your community assumes to be true. Same with values. Your community's values are more important than yours, right? So what you're doing should be in alignment with community values. And the goal is emancipation by way of action. So I'm going to use this research moment to take action and alleviate that which I illuminate. So whatever I discover, I'm going to leverage my resources, because I work at a university, to fix it in alignment with community needs. And so what we use for that, community-based participatory action research alongside interviews, focus group surveys, observations, etc. But the difference is we analyze in community using communities of practice. So all too often we don't regard community members as experts of their own experience, but they are. And they should be the ones helping us analyze their experience, okay? Oh, and for Futurity, Futurity is all about creating community capacity. I want to create the conditions for the communities that I work with to be able to do this thing by themselves. And so knowledge is created. If knowledge is created, can we create new knowledge? Can we create the kinds of knowledge and communities that we want to live in? Can research help us define the future's parameters without prescribing it? If the very act of imagining an alternative future creates a new reality, then our research should be able to create new realities, right? So let's use our research to imagine alternative futures and build new realities. If values can be reshaped and reimagined, can we do that in the future? Can we create new values and new ways of existing? And so the goal is to generate capacity, tools, and conditions for new systems to be built, for something else to take place. And so how we do that then is through everything in the action research category, but we add the aesthetic, the inventive, and non-traditional research to that. And that's what's going to take me to my work, because I embody both of these in the work that I do, right? So it's about teleological utility. What can we do with this data? Can we build community capacity for change? So the Justice Fleet. The Justice Fleet comes out of a desire that my students had. So I used to do this exercise in the classroom. The first time I taught about privilege, I was teaching at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles. Extremely wealthy student body, right? All of my students, for the most part, drove cars that were like 3 times my salary. Yeah, I'm not even joking. I made a joke and didn't know it. Great. And so when I started talking to these babies about privilege, the guilt that invaded their heart space prohibited them from learning. And so I was like, oh shoot, what am I gonna do? I'm an artist, I process through art. So I told them, go get a canvas, and I want you to paint your bias on that canvas and ask for forgiveness, right? It's a simple step in just acknowledging the role you might play in creating these issues or perpetuating these issues. And I said, and come to class and we'll present. It got worse. They came to class, they're standing up saying all these really awful things, because by this time they feel safe with me. They probably shouldn't have. And so I was like, oh shoot, what am I gonna do again? So I always have art supplies around. So I went and found a palette. You know those wood palettes that for like 5 years on Pinterest everybody was making new furniture out of? I went and found one of those palettes. I got some paint, I got some glue, and I went to the internet and I printed all these positive affirmations, like these cute little pictures. And I said, okay, now we're gonna put all of our canvases together on this thing. We're gonna make this quilt. It was a quilt, but it was really just a bunch of 3-dimensional art. And so as they were gluing their canvases down, I also asked them to find quotes to help them process their feelings. And so, you know, they're quoting like Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and stuff. And that's where the transformation happened. I saw light bulbs go off, because what was gifted to them was an opportunity to reflect on their harm in a safe space and then let it go. Figure out a way, like it didn't ruin their lives. Admitting that they had this bias, they realized it's not gonna kill me. It's okay. And one of the things I tell people all the time is if we wanna fix racism, white people have to stop taking racism personally, right? When someone points something out to you, the default is, well, I didn't do it. Baby, I wasn't talking about you, okay? And in the moments when I am talking about you, I want you to reconsider that as a gift, because if I call you out on your shit, it means I trust that you have the capacity to fix it. But if you make a mistake around me and I don't say anything, I don't believe in you, right? So be thankful, right? It's a gift. And so I turned this activity into a class assignment. I did it for 10 years. And so when I was at SLU, the first class I did it in, they were like, we gotta do this in the streets. And I was like, well, how are we supposed to do that? You know, my students are constantly stretching me. And so they were like, let's make something where we can like go out and do this at like community centers. And I'm like, okay, keep talking. So there was a professor at SLU named Eileen Berman, and she has a mobile art pop-up that she takes out into North City, St. Louis. And so she brings art supplies, it's on a bike, it's all this, it's felted out, it's super cute. And so I said, well, I'm gonna go talk to Eileen and get some advice on how we could do this. And so I went and talked to her, and she said, my only advice is you make it beautiful so people feel like you care about them. Then they're gonna wanna participate. Bet. So we had this truck. I reached out to the folks in the diversity office at SLU, and I said, I wanna create this mobile museum. I need a vehicle. And they were like, oh, here's a truck. I didn't ask for a truck, it's cool. I asked for an RV or a bus, but whatever, it's fine. So when I go back and I'm like, so when do I have to give it back? And they were like, you don't. I said, you just gonna give me a truck? Okay. So we had it wrapped. So one side has radical forgiveness, the other side has radical imagination. So radical forgiveness is our first exhibit, and we did that intentionally because when you reach out to funders and you say things like, I wanna help people forgive these systems, they're like, yes, that's what we need. We need forgiveness because I'm tired of hearing about this shit. And so every grant we wrote, we got 100%, every single one. But fast forward to transfuturism, every grant we wrote, it was denied, every single one, except the ones from the Transgender Justice Fund. And they created that fund specifically to fund trans artists and trans organizations because they knew no one else would, right? Intention. And so radical forgiveness is all about understanding the process of forgiveness and how it impacts our ability to work. So if you grew up in church or if you grew up around churchy people, you learn you forgive and forget, turn the other cheek, be the bigger person. And that's not what this is. This is saying that forgiveness is a selfish act that is a requirement for us to move forward in our work. That if we are so traumatized by the conditions within we work and live and we don't heal from that, not only do we run the risk of repeating them, right? So just flipping the power structure, but we also run the risk of harming people. And so you can hold systems and people accountable without holding on to the pain that those systems and people cause. But how do you do that? And so I came up with a whole pathway to forgiveness to help people start letting stuff go as they are continually being traumatized. So this is not about forgiving your oppressor or making other people feel comfortable in these moments, but rather saying, I don't have to hold on to this pain. And this can be in your personal life, in your work life, in your activist life, doesn't matter. You can give yourself permission to let the pain go when you've experienced a trauma. And it doesn't have to start when someone apologizes, because baby, most people, don't know how to apologize, but we're gonna talk about that later in y'all's president's email. And most people don't know that they need to apologize, because half the time they don't even know they did anything wrong, okay? And so we say, okay, this is my process. Everybody's process looks different, but essentially you recall what happened, like admit that something happened, you process it. Are there other ways to read this thing that happened? Then as you're processing it, you're gonna let yourself feel. This is the part I suck at. I don't like feelings, good or bad. Like when people sing happy birthday to me, I shroud. If you notice, I walked behind when my bio was being read because it's just fucking weird, I don't like it. But you gotta let yourself feel, because if you don't feel, those things are gonna just sit inside of you and they sediment, right? So imagine anger, anxiety, pain, frustration, sediment, body's heavy, depression, right? You gotta let it out. Once you let it out, what are you going to replace it with, right? So once you let it out, you can gift yourself the ability to let it go. Once you let it go, what are you going to replace it with, right? So I replace it with the lessons, the love, the things that help me grow and become the best version of myself, right? So I replace that story. And lastly, you got to be mindful, right? Humans are messy. If I asked all of you to bring all your crap into this room, we would not be able to move in this room. It'd be completely full of crap. Humans are messy, complicated, big walking, talking contradictions, and that's okay. But if we can understand that about each other, it's easier to understand how people move, how people make mistakes, and exercise grace and compassion in those moments. And so people come to us, we have all these huge signs about radical forgiveness, what it is, the myths, some of the stuff I just shared, and then we ask them to paint with us. So we give them a small canvas and we ask them to paint their bias and ask for forgiveness, or paint how others have been biased towards them and grant forgiveness. And then we sit down and we sew them together and we talk about it, okay? And so we're taking these really difficult conversations and making them a lot easier because we're painting, and painting's fun, okay? Radical imagination is what we did the last couple of days, and this was all about giving people space to remember how to imagine. Because again, we know what our problems are at this point, right? We know how power works, we know what systems we're up against. Now it's about rebuilding new systems. And so this is an exercise in just unconstrained imagination. And so I've used it in the classroom, but where the magic happens is in organizations who are around, who work around transformation and things like that. They come to us. We put people with the power to make decisions in the same room with the people most impacted by those decisions and those injustices. They talk about their experience, they build solutions, and the people with the power, they implement them almost immediately. So we've seen nonprofits create new systems within 6 months of using this, which does not happen in the nonprofit sector. Okay, at all. You wonder why your university hasn't changed? Because they're nonprofits. So people take toys, they build cool things. One of the things that came out of almost every build our first year was the need for green space for healing, meditation garden, reflection garden, something to that effect. So we also created this thing called a grief garden. So an intentional green space that uses horticulture, sound, art, rage, and play therapy to decrease stigma around wellness. Offer space to begin the healing process by tapping into your grief, and just promote a culture of wellness that's public facing and eliminates barriers to participate. So there's 5 activities that people can come, you walk the path. There's a literal place to punch and scream and yell and throw paint. There's a place called For Whom the Bell Tolls. It's a sound therapy exercise where you pick up a bell if you've engaged in a particular grief act. So writing an obituary, bailing a loved one out of jail following a protest, washing tear gas out of someone's eyes. So if you've done these things, you pick up the bell and you ring it, and you're hearing all these people ringing these bells. You can also write your own on the bells. So it's just a way to say you're not alone. It's a sound aesthetic, right? I'm not by myself. Then they do radical forgiveness, right? So what is it that you need to say to your loved one when you get an opportunity? But then there's a playground, right? Because not all grief is painful. Some grief is about joy, memory, happiness, right? Most funerals end with some happiness, right? When people get up and start sharing, there's always humor in those stories, right? Humor heals, laughter heals. So there's a playground. But it's also a place for kids to be, because we oftentimes, when people die, we don't consider children's grief at all, right? We don't even talk to them about it half the time, right? So we're focusing on kids too. Kids have a place in the grieving process. Then there's the last space is the repository. So spaces for you to write something you need to let go of that's not permanent. So we have rice paper, chalkboard, water to wash it away at the end of every week, right? It goes back into the earth. And then the last exhibit is called Transfuturism, and this is my baby. This one resembles an actual art exhibit the most out of all of them. But basically in 2015, I wrote an essay that theorized that while Afrofuturists speculate a different future, trans and non-binary people are already living it in the flesh, because they are using their bodies to completely derail the gender binary and create a whole new system of being a gendered person. And that's some heroic shit, right? That's hello, clap for that, right? And I think that is something that everybody benefits from, right? So I'm gonna ask you a question. Who in here has some part of their body they wish would be different? Don't be shy. I'll know every single one of you, don't play with me, right? How much of what no, keep your hand up, please. Look around, you're not alone. I'm a part of the You're Not Alone crew. That's how I roll, okay? You're not alone. Now, it's like an AA meeting, everything's fine. Okay, so as we're looking around, put your hand down if that thing is not attached to ideal bodies when it comes to gender. Oh, I see maybe 2 hands went down. Gender messes with, you can put your hands down now. Gender messes with, unless you want to do some exercise, that's also fine. Gender messes with all of us because it creates these impossible ideals that we then spend our whole lives trying to attain. Y'all, my mama was born in 1952. She still talks about going on some diet to get her girlish figure back. And I'm like, Ma, that body's not finna change. That is your body. It's been like this for 60 years. Okay, maybe not 60. 40, okay? She's been this size and shape for 40 years. And y'all, my mom, she's so cute. She's got this cute little belly that all the babies love to play with. She's got these little tiny legs. And she carries her, she was a dancer. She carries herself like a dancer. But gender has her feeling so bad about herself, right? What the ideal woman is supposed to look like, which is an IG model, which, baby, they don't even look like that. That's all, they don't, okay? She keeps serial yo-yo dieter, right? And so what gender creates these really impossible ideals that make all of us feel inadequate. And so I wanted to talk about that. And so I wrote this essay, but it was rejected. So I said, okay, maybe I can't write it, it has to be witnessed. So I started interviewing and photographing trans and non-binary people. And I wrote a new essay. And I was like, I think it needs to look like Afrofuturistic art. And I am a painter, but I am not an illustrator. I don't do comics type drawings. So I searched high and low for a Black trans artist. And I found Ripley Bennett, beautiful human who's now basically my sister. And so we met, and it's kind of a cute story how we met. I'm gonna tell it, because I got 25 minutes. The person I was dating at the time, they were at this music event and they had a roommate, and this roommate is a Black trans woman who draws. So my partner's like, oh, let me tell you about Amber's, project, because they're looking for a Black trans woman illustrator, and pulls up these pictures and it's like, do you know who this artist is? And Ripley's like, that's my work. And so I got on a Skype call, because this was back when Skype was still cool. I got on a Skype call, loved each other from start. So I actually invited her to come live with me. So she lived with me for 2 years, and we painted this project. So it took 6 years from idea to completion, but this is what it looks like. You can turn the lights down. It's a 6-minute video. Free society. Liberated future. Free society. Free society.
My name is Ty.
My name is Doris Santana.
I am gender nonconforming.
She and her.
My pronouns are they, them, and their.
I am a Black trans woman, resilient.
I don't have to use boxes.
There's no staticness. There's no like, oh, I met you today, and so now I think I know you, because tomorrow you could be somebody completely different.
Being able to exist. That is the hardest and most difficult thing about my gender, is existing.
Live and thrive and create.
I think that's what liberation truly is.
It's freeing. I think of like a garden. Like of all these different fruits and vegetables.
Where each individual is taking up all of their space, but that space is interconnected with other communities.
They all exist harmoniously and they're all different.
Maybe that's the future. We're not going to think about gender. We're going to think about the amount of electricity through body.
Existing.
Free society.
I think that's what liberation truly is.
There's always some nuance. That's actually a beautiful
That's me
thing.
and my kids.
Right.
FYI. I don't know why I had the feeling to tell you that, but I did. It's fine.
Zebulon Hurst.
He and Kai.
And I identify as a non-binary trans man.
Fluid femme king. It's not about how I look. Today, we're gonna say love. More love, more love.
My superpower is being kind.
It's not about whether I'm femme or whether I'm masculine. My fluidity and being a two-spirit person.
Like, I'm very cool with, like, who I am.
Being able to be who you want to be. I mean, isn't that the point of life?
I am a being that transcends many things.
We're here. We're always here.
My name is Kai King.
James Welch, he, him,
My name
his.
is Dio. I use the pronouns he, him, his.
James III, he, him, his.
They, them, theirs, and cutie.
Trans fact.
Afro-Latinx, trans man.
And my gender identity is fluid flux.
Divinity.
Open enough to just exist.
If I decide again in my life that I'm another gender, that I can be okay with that it's not static.
Is there room to really explore something that's not on the binary?
Divinity. I bend and create reality. Superpowers.
And that's how I feel about my gender,
Manifest.
A world in which people feel like they don't have to choose, but they can just be.
Make that become a reality. Divinity.
Hi, my name is Ripley Marie Bennett.
I'm Cameron.
My name is Imani Love. My pronouns are.
He or they.
She, her, hers. He, her, hers. Hi.
Appear to the world when I wanted to.
Hi. My authentic trans identity. I identify as a black trans woman. Queen God's sister. Honor the truth of my spirit. And my liege.
Being trans has enhanced that power.
My pronouns are. Goddess, bitch. Hi.
A gender-liberated future is a future in which all of us are liberated in one way or another.
Honoring the love that exists in the vessels that are non-binary. I'm still here.
So, oh, thank you. So when I talk about generating capacity or action research, for me, radical forgiveness is action research because it's saying people need this thing and I'm going to give it to them as best as I can, right? And it's creating a space for people to actively begin their healing journey. And Transfuturism is futurity because it's generating the capacity for trans and non-binary people to see themselves celebrated and see themselves differently and then act on that. And so one of the things, so the soundtrack you hear was done by a non-binary musician, and it's all the sound bites from our interviews, if you couldn't gather that. I think that's probably obvious. And then one of the things that we did was when we finished, we sent every single participant a framed print or a wrapped canvas of their painting. And then somebody asked me what was the greatest joy of doing this project. And obviously finishing it, this is the longest I've ever worked on anything in my life outside of having children, and so far this was way more gratifying. But it took 6 years. So there was a lot of moments of joy in those 6 years, but the best moment was the folks who called me when they got their prints in the mail. And I will never forget, the one that was the most moving is the picture you see first. This is Ty Cooper. And they called me and they said, "Is this how you see me?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "No, I'm not this beautiful." And I was like, "Ty, yes you are. How else did I come up with this? Yes, you are." And they were like, "I've never seen myself this beautiful, nor has anybody ever told me I am this beautiful." And then you just start bawling, you know. And that for me was the moment that that is creating capacity for someone to love themselves a little bit deeper, right? And so when we say like community capacity or action, it doesn't all have to be huge. It doesn't have to be something massive that's going to change the world. It could be something really small, as in saying, I see you, and I want to create the conditions for you to see yourself too. And so young adult fiction is new for me. I was thinking about, again, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, want to do things differently, want to make a difference, but also a very aesthetic generation. They are different when it comes to videos and images, and they have a lot of fingertips at their, they have a lot of fingertips. They have a lot of apps at their fingertips to create art and things like that. And so I was thinking about the fact that academia is full of really brilliant people who just talk to each other and tell each other how brilliant they are. If you've ever gone to a conference, you spend your time telling each other how great their ideas are. And then they get put into a journal that like 300 people read. So a journal that takes 5 years to publish, 300 people read, right? And so I said, what happens if I take all the theories I've ever written about gender and put them in a young adult fiction novel? So it's me doing what conservatives accuse me of doing, right? Trying to indoctrinate the kids. It's exactly what I'm doing here. And so the book follows these 5 kids who were chosen to dismantle the gender binary and eventually the genetic economy in the dystopian future. But it's all my theories written as a story, and it was really fun to write. It didn't take long at all, but guess what? I can't find anybody to publish it. So if anybody here knows a publisher, holler at me. So I'm gonna wrap this up really fast. So some things I'm working on now in terms of this action and futurity paradigm and how to push it forward. I have a Critical Futures book series. If anybody here is working on a book that does things differently or creates a map, a toolkit, a pathway to build new futures, please talk to me. I'd love to publish your work. I have a podcast of the same name. So if you want to just talk about your ideas, and I'm looking at you, Anthony, Mika, Kelly, and Alicia, and Kirsten, who's not here anymore, like come talk to me on the podcast. You got good ideas, like I want to talk about it. Right? It doesn't have to be academic-y. It could be the future of like, I don't know, legalizing marijuana. Let's talk about it, right? Or the future of like pandas. That's fine. Let's talk about it. I'm like the future of everything. I want to talk about it. And then, I have the Institute for Healing, Justice, and Equity. I want to turn it into a think tank because we've been doing a lot of research. We have like $7 million in grants to just do research. I'm like, oh, it's killing me. I want to do something. So I think I want to turn it into a think tank. And then I have some future wishes. So I'm talking to all the administrators and faculty in this room right now, right? Things that you can think about and things that can change your students' experiences and hopefully make it better. So the first one, heal from your academic trauma, please, right? Because if you don't heal from your academic trauma, you will continue to traumatize your students. Students, how many of you are traumatized by your professors? You see them hands up? Right? Heal from your stuff, please, right? We have to stop hazing our students. Learning should be about gifting students with the tools to keep learning, not making sure they learn a certain thing and think about it a certain way. Become possibility models. You have grad students here? No, only undergrad? Well, who in here wants to go to grad school? Okay, well, tell your future grad professors this, that I said it. Number one, stop with the urgency culture. Nothing we do saves lives. This is not an episode of Grey's Anatomy. If you do not answer that email at 10 p.m., nobody's gonna die, okay? So like 5 o'clock, shut the shit down. Go experience some joy, okay? No more urgency culture. Like chill out, right? Same thing with cancel culture, I talked about that. Can we start paying our grad students fair wages, right? So grad assistantships, that's not a living wage. Right, and so yes, this is not cool. Treat people how they want to be treated. So we heard the golden rule in kindergarten, treat people how you want to be treated. No, that's being a centrist. Treat people how they want to be treated, okay? And then chart paths beyond the PhD pipeline. You can do so many things with a PhD that don't require you to be a professor. Being a professor, I loved it. It was fun. I did it. I'm done now. But there are so many other things you can do, right? Be a possibility model. Add more color and aesthetic sensibility to your research. Like dance your data, paint your data. Like transfuturism, we literally painted our data, and there are 8-year-olds in the exhibit. Like, this is so cool. When's the last time they said that about one of your journal articles? Like color your ideas, write new futures into existence. Prioritize creativity over compliance. I tell people all the time, I mentioned it last night at dinner, having a PhD, an MD, a JD, an ED, it doesn't mean that you're really smart. It means you are compliant. It means you know how to follow rules, okay? So like, can we prioritize creativity over that? And then last is take risks, fail fast, apologize often. So now I'm specifically talking to the administrators who wrote that apology. We don't know how to apologize well. Some of y'all in this room don't know how to apologize well. So how do we apologize in a way that actually mitigates harm and creates alternative ways of being? So I'm going to give you this. People pay me a lot of money to give them this, okay? I'm going to bill you later. So how do we apologize correctly? Number one, state the harm that was caused. Doesn't matter if you did it, just state it. This thing caused harm, and I see that, and I recognize that. And then acknowledge the historical context and contemporary ramifications of that harm. So I don't know what was written on the doors in that freshman dorm room, but I gather that it was anti-Black. Was it the N-word? Yeah. Oh, look at me guessing. Was it spelled N-I-G-G-E-R? Yep. Okay, so we're going to acknowledge where that word comes from, why it's harmful, and how it hurts people today. Right? So we're going to say that I don't just know that harm was caused, I know exactly why it was caused. Then we're going to eliminate the excuses. No excuses, because when you bring an excuse into an apology, it dismisses everything you said. I don't care why you did it, don't do it no more. Then we're going to state plans to correct behavior. What are we going to do so this does not happen again? And then we're going to follow through and correct that behavior, right? So instead of a really long email, from whomever wrote that email, it could have said, hey kids, this is messed up. And I am so sorry that it happened. And I recognize exactly why it's wrong. There is a long history of whiteness abusing this word to make Black people feel small, insignificant, undervalued, and like they don't belong here. But we're gonna fix that. We're gonna hold the students who did it accountable because we have video evidence. And we're going to create new programs, new initiatives, new structures, new systems so that our students begin to value difference on this campus and that our faculty and our staff also value difference so that they can also see these things and shut them down, because we know that this isn't the only place this has happened. It's happening in your classrooms. It's happening on your athletic teams. It's happening in other places, right? That's how you apologize. Oh, well, I was done, so that's appropriate. Thank you. There's some like contact information next. Great. Yeah, I'm done. That was perfect timing. So I guess it's Q&A time now. Oh my God, we have 6 minutes. I'm sorry, I talked too long. I'm bad. We have 5 minutes if one person wants to ask one good question. Or you can just sit with it and we can all go protest. Also fine. Oh, there's a question.
A lot of the stuff you covered is actually information I want to use in my capstone. I'm a painter too. Is there any way that I can get your information and we can talk more about it?
Absolutely. That's the best question I've ever gotten. Yes. And they have my PowerPoint. I saw people taking pictures of slides. You can share it. That's totally fine. And if you are interested in radical forgiveness, the entire exhibit is virtual. So just like transfuturism, that video was made to be much shorter, but it's a long, so you can actually go in and walk through the exhibit like a virtual character. So you can get your forgiveness on if you'd like. Look at your face. You're just happy to be here, huh? Well, I guess we're done. I don't know. Are we done? I think we're done. We got 5 minutes. We're not done. Any other questions? Right there. You see? You see Laura? Oh, no. They're coming.
Thank you. I just was, thinking about radical forgiveness. So once you get to the point of letting go, how do you interact in like these new, like when experiences happen again? Like what is that mindset then after the forgiveness happens?
So if it continues to happen, I have 2 responses. The first response is an honest conversation. Like, you keep doing this thing. Do you have the capacity to change and grow? And I wait for a response. And if I'm met with dismissal, if I'm met with aggression, then I know probably the answer is no, which means the next response is severance, right? Y'all know that song, I don't blank with you, right? It's a million other things that I'd rather poop do. I only say my own cuss words, not other people's. So yeah, like I sever relationships. You do not have to share space with people who cause you harm, and you do not have to be at institutions that cause you harm. You don't even have to live in a country that causes you harm. Hello. We have 4 minutes now. I answer questions quickly.
We have the protest. How about one more?
One more. I saw a hand all the way back there somewhere.
Hello.
Hi.
I want to ask with apologizing. When apologizing and when we're trying to, how can we make sure that we identify what can be changed and how to change it, and just that's just something that I was confused about. Like, how can we be sure to encapsulate all the things that need to be changed, and how can that be in one apology? Because like apologies just seem like such like a small thing when like sometimes there's just so much that needs to be said.
Yeah, so in a particular moment, it's not your job to fix everything, right? Fix what you can, right? So that means it's not going to be everything. So we have this thing, the circle of impact. You vent out, support in. So you kind of make a circle and you identify who's most impacted by whatever harm was caused, those people, and then you put yourself on that map somewhere, right? So maybe you're kind of in the middle, like a little bit of like vicarious trauma, but it wasn't your trauma, but you did have some, so you're not on the outside. And so your job then is the people closer to the impact, you just offer support. The people further away, you can vent to. But I would also use that as a guide on who to ask for help. So the person that you caused harm to, don't ask them to help you write your apology, right? But someone who has a similar experience who can help you, ask for help. Say, I did this thing and I want to apologize well. And I want to make sure I understand, because maybe you don't know that you messed up and somebody tells you and you have no idea. How do you figure out what to say, right? Ask and get help. It's okay to get help, right? It's okay to do some Googling and then go and ask somebody, this is what I found, is this accurate? Does this summarize your experience? Does this, if someone said this to you, would this feel good or would it feel like, you know, an empty act of allyship? Yeah. All right, well, thank you all.